is that the jury reached a verdict on coercion. It found there was not coercion, and I think the judge said coercion today as a basis for a sentence at least a dozen times. We think that that is unconstitutional. We think that a jury verdict should mean more than our jury's verdict seems to mean, and so we are.
The judge's comments seemed like a death sentence, and the courtroom was tense and suffocatingly silent, with his mouth gritted and his fists holding the table so firmly that his knuckles turned white. Diddy sat still. The room appeared to stop in shock as soon as the judge completed reading the sentence. However, his lawyer was already leaning in his direction before the last word's echo had even subsided.
Absolutely. Filed a cross appeal. What would happen in that regard if they filed a cross appeal and then Sean Diddy Combs get a higher sentence?
He would not get a higher sentence, and they're not gonna cross appeal. We're gonna appeal. We think we're right, and they'll respond to the appeal, and it'll be decided by the Second Circuit as soon as.
Tell us about the conversation you had with your client after the sentencing.
Consensual. The judge clearly thought the sexual encounters weren't consensual.
Because he's biased.
What did you make of his remarks?
He's biased.
If anyone, I'm happy to go. So we think that's just absolutely inconsistent with the jury's verdict. I mean, the jury's verdict was resoundingly clear. There was no sex trafficking. There was no racketeering. Everything was consensual. Everything was adult, which is why he was convicted only of the prostitution offense. What we feel happened today was that the judge acted as a 13th juror,
yes,
one that
did.
we did not choose, and that he second-guessed the jury's verdict.
Well, at least the judge was open-minded. At least the judge was open-minded for both sides. Gave consideration.
Did you have a chance to talk to Sean Combs? Did you have a chance to talk to your client? Can you tell us about the conversation after the sentencing?
How was he?
How's your client?
How would it impact sex workers?
But he's okay to push back a little. But he's okay to
Come on, man.
stop pushing people, y'all.
Y'all making it circus now, bro.
Space out. He does feel justice was served, though. He said he takes accountability, and I felt like Diddy definitely took accountability for everything, sir. And I would like to just let you know that everything was not consensual, sir. Please don't say that. It was not consensual. Even Diddy
This is the
admitted
defense team, man. Let's answer the question.
yes, but he did allegedly.
All right, Queen. All right, Queen. All right.
Can you talk to us about talking to Sean after this?
I'm not. Obviously, we spoke to Sean. I'm not going to talk about what Sean and we discussed. It's a privilege.
We all feel comfortable bringing.
And tell us what
location are you going to recommend?
No matter which community it impacts.
What are the next steps?
Why weren't the sex workers on trial today? Where were the escorts?
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Here's the question I heard: what's next?
Yes.
Why weren't
What's
the
next
escorts
is that
speaking?
Wait.
Transportation and
we're going to try and find the right facility for Mr. Combs. We're going to ask the judge to recommend that. We are very serious about pursuing an appeal. So we have a number of things all going on at the same time.
Ahead of the judge giving down Sean Combs' sentencing, but today, right off the bat, Christy Slavic, who is a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor, she said Mia no longer wishes to give an impact statement. She had submitted that written statement, and that the tone of the defense letter, I think, was what really kind of changed her mind as to coming into the courtroom today. And I can only imagine probably how Mia feels specifically. She's using a pseudonym even to testify, even as she's writing letters to the court, because of just the fear that she has been getting in terms of what she believes to be backlash, either from Sean Combs or his fans, or even just the attention that it's that the case has brought against her too. And so I was very surprised that she didn't attend court in person today, but I can understand why, because even the judge said to Mark Agnifilo today that the tone of the defense's letter in response to Mia giving a victim impact statement was just completely inappropriate. And it was a pretty harsh letter, Jesse. I'm sure that you've already read it, but it was kind of a very harsh tone, and it was kind of similar a little bit to her cross-examination too.
Now let's talk about the prosecution. So prosecutors today, they outlined their argument in court. It echoed a lot of what their filings were in anticipation of the sentencing. What were some of the key arguments, the themes that stood out today about why they say it was justified for?
Her tone was harsh, controlled, and desperate as she whispered urgently. In a matter of seconds, The courtroom was filled with a commotion of a legal counterattack as documents were shuffled and pens clicked, as though attempting to comprehend what had just transpired. Diddy's gaze flitted first to the judge and then to the gallery. He was in a state of shock that results from denial rather than astonishment. He had entered that room with the hope, possibly even the conviction, that his wealth, connections, and background would somehow lessen the impact. However, this was not like the others. The judge had been very clear about her position. Sean Diddy Combs was no exception to the law. The punishment hit him like a freight train. It was lengthy and more severe than most people had anticipated. His face was filled with disbelief, which was visible. He was motionless one moment. Then he was leaning in and whispering angrily to his lawyer. He spoke in a hoarse-like, low voice that nearly cracked. She gave a quick nod, already collecting her papers, leafing through binders, and indicating to another defense team member who was sat behind them. They had no time to waste. They were aware that time was against them. Reporters were already on the air outside the courtroom. Sean Diddy Combs' children are supporting him.
Combs is getting support from his kids. During the rapper's October 3rd sentencing hearing, several of Combs' children took the stand to advocate for their dad, who is facing years in jail following his July conviction on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. During their remarks per NBC News, his 34-year-old son Quincy told Judge Aaron Subramanian that his father is, quote, a changed man. His brother, 31-year-old Justin, went on to add that he hopes his father will get the chance to right this wrong and to be the man he truly is. 27-year-old Christian Combs also asked the judge to give his father grace in his sentencing, adding, "He is the greatest in the world. He is my hero, has always been my hero, and always will be my hero. He always taught me to treat women with respect." NBC News noted that Combs was visibly moved during the statements, putting his head down to cry as his daughter Chance took the stand. The 18-year-old told the court, "We have emptiness in our lives," noting that her father's 13 months in jail have been unexpectedly healing. Combs also has a 2-year-old daughter named Love Sean, and in her speech to the judge, her 18-year-old sibling Delilah stated in part, "Our 2-year-old sister is asking where Dad is, the same way we grew up motherless. It's a hole that can't be filled. We are tired of being strong. We have already lost so much, our mother, our father. Please give us the chance to heal together and move forward together." Combs shares Christian, Quincy, Delilah, and her twin sister Jessie with late ex Kim Porter, who passed away in 2018. While Combs was found guilty on the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution following a 2-month trial,
to have a lengthy sentence. Remember, they were asking for 11 years. How did they justify it today? What were the arguments they made in court?
Yeah, well, today, Christy Slavic making the arguments on behalf of the government, she said that today is about accountability and justice. And she was talking specifically about accountability, Jesse. She was talking about the conduct that was lasting for a 15-year period. I mean, even if you go back to the superseding indictments where it says this conduct went on from 2009 all the way to 2024, that's a long period of time. And so from the government's perspective, they really just wanted accountability from the defendant, that being Sean Combs. And then they also wanted justice particularly for the victims. I know when we often talk about the Sean Combs case, the Diddy case, the P. Diddy case, he is the focus of this, but I think a lot of people have to remember that there were victims in this case, that being Cassie Ventura, that being Jane, that also kind of also applying to some of the charges that he was acquitted for too, where you can also bring in like Mia and Capricorn Clark and Deontay Nash. And so I think the government from their perspective was really trying to speak on behalf of all of those people. And so today, Christy Slavic, again, she was saying that the law requires the court to know all about the defendant and the defendant's conduct. This isn't just a case about freak-offs and hotel nights. It's about a man who did horrible things to people. He weaponized currency against victims. They were talking about that even though he was convicted just on the Mann Act charges, that it's also kind of in relation to the violence, and that the defendant didn't understand or doesn't understand how harsh his conduct was, and that his respect for the law was just something as simple as lip service. And so, yes, the government was asking for a far steeper penalty and punishment when it came to Sean Combs' sentencing. They were hoping for those double digits, and I think they were kind of opposed to the whole split the baby method, as Christy Slavic said today in court. And so they did want a harsher end of the sentencing today. And I think as far as the judge is concerned and what his ultimate sentence would be, it kind of ended up being a kind of happy medium a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into that. And the defense, A number of defense attorneys spoke. I think almost all of them. You had Xavier Donaldson, you had Brian Steele. What were some of the themes they were focusing on in terms of why Sean Combs deserves a lenient sentence, why 14 months would be appropriate?
Yeah, so right off the bat, Jason Driscoll making the arguments on behalf of the defense, because Jesse, yes, it was Jason Driscoll who spoke, it was Nicole Westmoreland who spoke, Xavier Donaldson who spoke, Mark Agnifilo, and Brian Steele. That's 5 of his what?
Live defense. The urgency of breaking news made their voices tremble. They were writing the headlines in real time. Diddy received a sentence of years in prison. The judge renders severe decision. An urgent appeal is filed by Diddy's legal team. The empire, which had taken decades to establish, appeared to fall apart in a matter of minutes while the entire world watched. As the guards moved in, Diddy carefully got his feet inside. In an attempt to soothe him, his lawyer put a hand on his shoulder and whispered something. He gave a small nod, but his expression was expressionless, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. She turned to the judge and asked for a moment to speak with her client as the guards approached. A brief, anxious pause before the inevitable was permitted by the judge. They talked rapidly. Their body language made it clear that this was no typical conversation. His attorney was laying out the next steps, which included fighting for bail while the appeal was ongoing, filing an urgent plea to suspend his punishment, and appealing right away. Every second counted. They were aware that their chances would drastically decline once he was transferred. There was no tone of defeat between them. It was a plan for war.
And my mother, you taught me better. I threw everything away. I ruined everything. But what is the emotion there? Is it just words? Is he completely stone cold face? Or is he crying? Is he upset? And I think all of these things are something that Judge Arun Subramanian will be clocking, because I mean, that's really what it is. Is he truly sorry? Is he truly remorseful for everything that he's done? I mean, he's now been convicted of a crime here, the transportation to engage in prostitution, which, to your point, Jesse, we haven't heard an apology for all of that. We've heard an apology for the domestic violence side of things. And I mean, I will just guess that Diddy might go on for a bit longer, as it is his first time really to address all of these accounts. But I want to know the emotion behind all of it.
It's a great point, and that's obviously something that Elizabeth Milner would know, because she's inside there. She can hear it for herself. But if we're clocking this, if we're clocking that he's not directly addressing the federal crimes that he was convicted of, you know Judge Subramanian's going to say it too. He says, I let down my community. I wanted to show we could take care of our own problems. I got lost. I'm not this bad person. I'm sorry to my community. I let you all down. People can change. I know I've changed. There is a part about this, Joe, and he goes, sometimes you have to go through life experiences. These are not excuses. I can't change the past, but I can change the future. I beg your honor for mercy to be a father again, to be a son again, a leader in my community again, to get the help I need. Now, Joe, look, we're criticizing parts of this from a legal point of view. From a human point of view, could the judge be persuaded that this is a guy who's really learned his lesson, that could be a force of good, that he wasn't convicted of racketeering and sex trafficking, that while transportation to engage in prostitution is a serious crime, and there were elements of violence and drugs that were a part of it, and this happened many times, that perhaps he should not have to spend a significant portion of his life now in prison?
Here's what I say, at the risk of coming off like I'm banging on Diddy, and this is not a banging, Diddy day kind of thing for me. But if he's learned his lesson in 14 months, he'll learn it better in 2 or 3 years. And so what that means is there's got to be another reason over and above him learning his lesson. That's part of it. But over and above him learning his lesson, for him to be released more sooner than later. And that could be the force of good that he could be. I don't want to minimize that. I don't want to minimize the fact that he's, he's got ingenuity. He's creative. He has a huge platform. Everybody's going to be watching the things that he does next. And so that would have to be more of the reason to let him get out earlier. Because again, he knows how to succeed. And in all of these areas where he says, because of, he lost his father and it made him more likely to be a domestic abuser or whatever that was, he overcame the odds in so many other ways. So that doesn't fly either. So it's really got to be his ability to do something maybe that almost nobody else could do coming from this situation. So I'm not going to minimize the power of that and how the judge may evaluate that, but it's going to have to be that even more than just learning the lesson.
He just said, I don't want to let God down. I have no one to blame but myself. I know I will never put my hands on another person again. I'm willing to comply with any conditions. Me sharing my story is not a scheme to get less.
The attorney's tone was clipped, hard, and somewhat impersonal. She wasn't merely defending a customer. She was battling for a guy whose legacy and reputation depended on it. Meanwhile, Diddy was clearly losing his mind. His mouth quivered. His gaze strayed to the gallery, which was crowded with reporters, relatives, and old co-workers. He was clearly feeling the pressure of everything. He had been bigger than life, impenetrable and unbeatable for years. But suddenly, in the face of harsh, icy justice, all that strength and all that image meant nothing. You could hear the crowd's murmur turn into a roar of noise as he was escorted from the courthouse. Others yelled encouraging remarks. Disgusted by the accusations and the case's verdict, others hurled insults. Chaos broke out outside as the press pressed for every conceivable response. Cameras flashed, and microphones were pushed into faces. Shortly after, Diddy's attorney emerged, encircled by her entourage.
Chance to share my story. This has a positive impact. Thank you to the jury. Your Honor gave me the confidence in the jury to believe that I did not have to testify. They sacrificed 8 weeks. I thank them. I thank them for not guilty. Serena, back to you. Your thoughts on this?
Well, here's the thing. Sean Diddy Combs always had a platform to tell his story. He didn't need to be convicted of heinous crimes to be able to inspire people and use his power for good. I feel it's such a shame that somebody who did come from such a difficult and broken background and was able to pursue his dreams and get there, then turned around and used it to manipulate people, to harm people who are very vulnerable to him. And he used his power for bad. Maybe he did some good things. Maybe his children love him. That's true. But there are many, many convicted felons with children who were innocent and are always going to be innocent, waiting for their fathers or mothers to come home. He's not unique in that situation. What made Sean Combs unique is that he grew out of a terrible situation, and instead of using that to better his community and better the people around him, he used them and ended up doing these heinous crimes towards the women in his life. So I don't know that it rings so favorably to a judge that he's now telling his story in this way.
Well, he might have been listening to us because, Sierra, you know what he just said? I take full responsibility for my Mann Act convictions. They want you to make an example of me. I want you to think about making an example of what a person can do if they get another chance. Consider the beautiful children who spoke for me. Again, I've heard, sometimes we have both heard statements from defendants when they're sentenced. Sometimes it really have no impact. Sometimes they're saying the jury got it wrong, I'm innocent. Sometimes their words kind of are hollow. By the way, Sean Combs just rapped. He says, no matter what anyone says, I am truly sorry. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm curious from your perspective, does this one stand out to you, Sierra? Is it different?
I think this does stand out. I mean, just minutes ago, we were saying, okay, we haven't heard about the Mann Act. We haven't heard about the transportation to engage in prostitution. And we said Judge Arun Subramanian would be clocking this. So it seems as though this may be a strategic move on the path of P. Diddy to mention this and to say, right out of the gate, hey, I'm sorry to Cassie, Jane, etc., all the people that he hurt and how. Then he talked about his family, and then now he's talking about his conviction here. And I do have to wonder if perhaps he went through and, talked it through with his defense attorneys. Hey, here's what I'm thinking of saying. What do you think I should include? What do you think I should, exclude? All of those sort of things. I think it's interesting that he says, this isn't any sort of scheme here in order for me to get less time. Make an example out of me in the way that I can go on and share my story. And this kind of goes to what Serena was saying. P. Diddy was already a public figure. He didn't have to be convicted of a crime like this in order to share his story. I mean, we've seen a lot of other celebrities who have gone through addiction or things like that who haven't been convicted and then show us a positive change as a role model. So I think it's interesting, but I do think it's strategic. He brought up the Mann Act.
Okay, Serena, what did you say to me before? You go, if he might change his opinion, he might take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Judge says, let's take 5 minutes. 5 minutes. All right. What does that mean? What does that
How
mean?
much case law can...
Is he changing his
change?
sentence?
Oh, man, 5 minutes is that perfect amount of time to show that you're taking it seriously, but not yet quite enough time to really change the words that you were planning on saying. I don't think that he's going to change what he intended to say when he first started today's session. I think he obviously wants to give everybody a break. He wants the optics of showing that he is taking everything.
The attorney's tone was clipped, hard, and somewhat impersonal. She wasn't merely defending a customer. She was battling for a guy whose legacy and reputation depended on it. Meanwhile, Diddy was clearly losing his mind. His mouth quivered. His gaze strayed to the gallery, which was crowded with reporters, relatives, and old co-workers. He was clearly feeling the pressure of everything. He had been bigger than life, impenetrable and unbeatable for years. But suddenly, in the face of harsh, icy justice, all that strength and all that image meant nothing. You could hear the crowd's murmur turn into a roar of noise as he was escorted from the courthouse. Others yelled encouraging remarks. Disgusted by the accusations and the case's verdict, others hurled insults. Chaos broke out outside as the press pressed for every conceivable response. Cameras flashed, and microphones were pushed into faces. Shortly after, Diddy's attorney emerged, encircled by her entourage.
In any second, but I think we're looking at significant prison time here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge makes an incredible note that, you've had the chance to deter. You were not deterred. You were given an opportunity over and over again, specifically during the investigation, and you can't be stopped. And if you can't be stopped, I'm going to have to be the one to stop you.
Yep. And by the way, the judge has considered his history. He said about the fact that, he became Sean Combs after his father died. That is especially impressive given the early violent death of your father and the trauma that must have left. So he's appreciating all this, but at the same time, he's hitting all of the factors and he's talking about the evidence that came out during the course of this trial. He just said, Jane says he told her, take this pill, go out there, bleep his bleep, bleep him, I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Now I'm wondering here, Joe, are we talking double digits?
I think we're going a little higher. We'll see how high we go. But 5 to 7 at least, and maybe even a little bit more. That's what it's sounding like. And there's an argument that the record supports that. Diddy was extra arrogant, and the length of time, I think, is incredibly persuasive and moving for the judge. Obviously, this is not something that happened once or twice and he got his hand caught in the cookie jar. This was built into what Diddy did. This was his culture, and he was truly lawless, just to put it where it really is. And so, the judge has been very honest about, I don't think that this deters you. And, I tell you, that tracks with me. Maybe we're all wrong. But to go off of what we've had happen and had said and had done and the trial record, that's not unreasonable for the judge to say that.
I am wondering also, Serena, if this is grounds for an appeal, where the court says, I'm not sentencing you on racketeering or sex. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. Okay, hold on one second. I'm getting the sentence right now. Okay, here we go. Oh boy.
I'm sweating.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. Now, I don't know if that means that that's the actual sentence right now, but 135 months is over 11 years in prison. So over 11 years in prison would be more than necessary. That's what the judge is saying here, Serena. I don't know if that's the official sentence as of yet. We're waiting to get confirmation about that. But what does that say?
Well, just to throw that number out there like that means that at least he was considering the 11 years that the prosecution put forth, and maybe even more than that. It sounds like he's kind of tempering it, like that is more than necessary and it'll be less than the 11. But it also sounds like he at least considered it very seriously as an option.
Now I'm wondering, Sierra, are we talking 7 years? I mean, again, it's something we talked about earlier. Maybe the benefit of the family speaking and the benefit of the work that he's done was not to get to 11 years, but not to go lower than the 5 to 7 range. So that may have been the benefit, but I'm wondering if 7 years is...
Prevent him from entering a place with high security. Rumors started to circulate during the appeal process that Diddy's first few hours in custody had already been chaotic, that his team was worried about his safety, that he wasn't handling the realities of prison life, and that he had been kept under monitoring because of his fragile mental state. Whispers became louder within the legal community. His lawyer's prompt action was hailed by some lawyers as a tactically sound move. Some rolled their eyes, calling it a desperate move by a man accustomed to playing with the system. Whatever anyone's opinion, one thing was certain. Diddy's group was working more quickly than anyone had anticipated. Social media was in a complete collapse at the same time. For hours, Diddy's emergency appeal and sentencing-related hashtags were trending. Supporters were divided. Some wanted pity, while others called for justice. The old clips came back. Music videos, remarks, and interviews are all being reinterpreted in the context of this recent crisis. Every statement and every lyric was being examined for underlying significance, as though the truth had been concealed.
On the sentence here, Sierra.
I think that is possible here, that maybe he's saying, okay, yes, the prosecution, the government brought forward this number of 11 years. Yeah, that is more than necessary based on, oh, we actually have an update, Jesse. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yep, a sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. So anybody that thought he would get 20 years, that's not happening. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that. But 14 months time served, that would not be sufficient. So he has rejected the defense's recommendation of 14 months. In other words, Diddy is not getting out of prison. He is not getting out of prison today. When he would, we're waiting. I'm not, it's not like I have these updates and I'm purposely delaying. I'm getting to them in real time as we are getting them. Sierra? So again, we're now looking at between 14 months and 11 years, but I guess, again, going back to this idea of we're looking at 7.
I mean, all speculation as of right now, but I think the most important thing is what you just said there, Jesse. P. Diddy, Sean Combs, is not getting out of jail today. And the 14-month recommendation that the defense brought has just been thrown completely out the window. The judge says, no, that's not sufficient enough. And I think what he's saying could be taken in a couple of different ways. One, that the 11 years is sufficient. Yes, I mean, based on your conviction here, because again, remember, this is a conviction. 11 years makes sense. It checks out. I agree with the prosecution. But to what Serena said earlier, perhaps, oh, and we do have a new update.
I think we have the official sentence right now for Sean Diddy Combs. After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the judge has just said, here the data shows a wide variety of sentences. Weighing all of the relevant factors, the court determines that the sentence is 50 months of incarceration. So 50 months of incarceration is a little over 4 years. It's 4.16 years in prison. Now, that is a bit lower than what the range was of 5 to 7 years, Sierra. Let's start there. If I'm reading this correct, and we're talking 50 months, and I'm waiting for, we have another update coming in. I'm just waiting to see what it is. But right now, it appears that Sean Combs has officially been sentenced to 50 months of incarceration, so 4 years in prison. You talk about time served, right? About a year. Are we talking now then 3 years, right, Sierra?
Yeah, so about 3 more years based on the 1 year that he has already served. And I guess, I mean, it is a win for P. Diddy and that the government asked for 11. You know, the recommendation was 5 to 7, which a lot of us guessed would happen. I mean, yes, he wanted to be out today. That was his goal. The defense, of course, wanting the 14 months. But 3 years compared to the 11 that the judge says, yeah, that's warranted. I mean, there's a huge difference in the range there, more than a decade versus less than half of a decade. We've got another update, Jesse, back to you.
Yep. Serena, Sean Combs was sentenced to 50 months of incarceration. Judge Subramanian, so a little over 4 years. That minus the 14 months already served. Is that the appropriate sentence, Serena?
Well, I'm sure Diddy is not thrilled to not walk out today, but he should be pretty happy with his defense team because I think the judge giving less than half of the prosecutor's recommendation and also
throughout, Diddy's world has reduced to a cell within the prison. The entourage, the expensive outfits, and the high-end timepieces were all gone. Now there was fluorescent light, chilly metal, and the hum of a world he never imagined encountering. He only had one phone call, and he made advantage of it right away to get in touch with his attorney. Insiders said he spoke in a wobbly but resolute voice. He said, "Get me out of here, whatever it takes." That turned into the mission. His attorney started putting together a small team of experts, including public relations strategists, crisis managers, and appeal specialists. They were trying to change the story, portraying Diddy as a man who had been wrongfully maligned by the media rather than as a criminal. Affidavits, transcripts, comments, and everything else that would cast doubt on the judge's decision were being gathered behind the scenes. Each hour was taken into account. Prosecutors, meanwhile, refused to back down. They said in a statement that Diddy's staff was attempting to delay the inevitable and that the appeal was without merit. The court's ruling was simply illegal. The defendant will be held accountable for his acts, according to one official. The fire was merely stoked by that statement. The prosecution was criticized by supporters for being overly severe. Critics claimed that the punishment was still insufficient, but it sparked a national discussion. Celebrity privilege versus justice. No decision on the emergency motion has been made after several days. Diddy's crew was working very hard, calling all of their contacts and filing further documents. According to several insiders, he was having trouble sleeping, pacing for hours, and refusing meals. Everything in his life, including the transactions, the image, and the story, had always been under his control. However, he was losing control of everything now. In a last-ditch effort, his attorney asked for a speedy hearing, pointing to Diddy's deteriorating mental health and safety issues. The hearing was approved. The cameras rolled once more, and Diddy emerged on screen over a video link, his face sketched, his eyes hollow, but he was still attempting to convey strength. His attorney made a strong case that her client should be given the opportunity to appeal without being imprisoned. The prosecution retaliated, claiming that Diddy's offenses were too grave, too intentional, and too harmful to society to be forgiven. But there was fear behind that resolve. The kind of terror you get when you realize that once the system decides it's your time to fall, celebrity, wealth, and power are meaningless. Up until this point in his life, Diddy had been above the noise and untouchable. The world watched that night as his lawyer submitted the last set of documents, wondering if this was the beginning of a comeback or the last remnants of a vanished